I'd like to welcome everyone to the 8th Annual Fans of Film Music. Each year I stand up here and look at our guest list with disbelief and keep getting so much awesome talent to come hang out with us. They're loyal and at times very vocal fan base. Thank you, Greg and Vicki and everyone else at the Bridge for again allowing us into your gorgeous studio. Thank you to everyone at the Bridge who worked so hard getting everything just right. Thanks to Kaya at Film Music Media for again covering our star-studded event. Thank you to the Creative Cortex and all of their team for filming today's event. Thank you, Daniel Schweiger, for again hosting for the 8th time. Alan Dahl, who did all of the great designing. He designed our cool retro poster. He's here in spirit. Yes, Alan, I will get you a goodie bag. Nancy Hoven, Henry Stanley, Edwin Windler, Backlot Music for creating the promos of Michael Abels' score, which is the only place on earth you can get his soundtrack on CD. I love saying that. Everyone gets a copy of that, and I better not see these on eBay.
Whether you want it or not.
Yeah. Walt Disney Pictures, La La Land Records for again giving us such great goodie bags. And okay, I'm tired of hearing myself speak. Daniel, take it away.
I'm Daniel Schweiger. I am the soundtrack editor of FilmMusicMag.com, and I want to welcome you to the Fahrenheit 451 edition of Fans of Film Music 8. I live in Tahunga, so if you suddenly see me book out of here in the middle of this, I'm trying to save my CD collection. A big thanks to Peter Hackman for having me back for the 8th time, and especially to you fans who've really come from far and wide to attend this event, and our fantastic composers. So I'm going to start out by introducing everyone in alphabetical order. Now, first up is a composer who's new to the genre, a musician who helped filmmaker Jordan Peele twist the time-worn fate of black characters in horror films into the critically acclaimed and scary social satire that made everyone heed the words, "Get out." Let's welcome Michael Abels. Not only did David Buckley's Cool Grooves make The Good Wife into a memorable television series, but he's also a major voice for action films that are on the run through his propulsive work on The Town, The Nice Guys, and putting a new spring into the step of Jason Bourne. Let's welcome David Buckley. Now, anyone who saw Hans Zimmer's amazing live tour will realize there is no more fierce or powerful cellist than the scoring or concert scene than Tina Guo. For several other million people, her blazing instrument is the Amazonian sword of Wonder Woman. Let's welcome Tina Guo. His music can soar in the sky with the orchestral magic of Pete's Dragon, but when it comes to being earthbound under a white sheet for a time-warped eternity, he's one composer who gives up the haunting ghost like no musical story before it. Let's welcome Daniel Hart. A composer with a talent for playing the African continent with such scores as The Last King of Scotland, Mandela, The Long Walk Home, The Queen of Katwe, and Roots. Alex Heffes has also tried to change the history of the JFK assassination with 11/22/63 and gave me the good idea to always shut off my computer's camera when I'm looking at some sites I shouldn't be for the amazing Black Mirror episode, Shut Up and Dance. Let's welcome Alex Heffes. Now, a composer with a powerful talent for rhythmically metallic action, Steve Jablonsky is the musical Optimus Prime of the hit Transformers film series, while also hearing the very real human heroism of Deepwater Horizon and Lone Survivor. Let's welcome Steve Jablonsky. And finally, we've got another superhero scoring Wonder Woman on our panel with a composer who's grown from being the Robin to Shirley Walker's Batman to becoming, along with her team, dynamic music partners into the foremost female composer of comic book animation with Justice League, Teen Titans, Avengers Assemble, and Batman the Killing Joke. Let's welcome Lolita Ritmanis. Now I'm going to start off by asking a question for each of our composers before we turn it over to you dudes. So, Michael, now Get Out is a huge break for you and both Jordan Peele. Now, what was it like doing your first major soundtrack that not only had to work as a thriller, but also literally had to get under these characters' surfaces?
It was great, really. It was great because Jordan had such a clear vision of what he wanted. And he was such a person who's able to tell you, to give you direction that is clear and yet also leaves room for inspiration. So, because he had thought through, it's a film that works on so many different levels. It's both a straight horror film, but it's also, there's sections that are really funny. And then it's also, it's really a social satire. And it needed to work on all those levels, but he understood how it was going to function on those ways. And so he was pretty clear about the types of music he wanted. And so I felt like I was, and he's also a fan of music, of horror film music as well. So he had also done his homework in the musical realm. So I felt like it was about, in the middle of it, I realized even with the stress that you have, I feel like I thought, this is as good as this gets probably. And I should really savor it. So I tried to as I even when I felt like I was under pressure.
Yeah, because you came from more of a kind of an art and installation world. I mean, just to be put into this whole new world of actually having to write like a film score.
Yeah, I most of the works that I have over the last couple decades are concert music, symphonic concert music, and the requirements and program are completely different. Sometimes you're given a commission and they give you a single word of notes, and then you're just able to write whatever you want. Not so in the film world. But Jordan had heard my concert music, and so that's why he thought I was someone who was up to this challenge. And the music that he liked of mine was the music that most, just in my estimation, other people didn't like. He specifically liked the things that were weird. So again, I felt like I had the maximum chance of doing something that he would be interested in.
Now, David, you've worked with a lot of really great action-centric composers, Harry Gregson Williams, John Ottman. But I mean, for me, I think probably one of the real game-changing action scores was The Bourne Identity, with the kind of ethnic propulsion that John Powell gave to that score. Now, what was it like for you to come into Jason Bourne, where they essentially reinvigorated the character and fitting that style that had been established, but also creating your own approach, your own voice for that film?
Well, when I got involved with the project, I sort of took it upon myself to rewatch the whole franchise. And the first thing that struck me was how the first movie really felt like an art film, both in terms of the way it was shot and in terms of the music. I think the music was revolutionary at the time. It was interesting talking to John in the process that I think the sound of Bourne has sort of been devalued over the years, that it has in actual fact become the sort of the common language of TV shows, of films. And I think it's one thing that's John, I think he'd be the first to admit it, he's found it quite challenging at times to maintaining his sort of position in action scoring, just because that's so pervasive, just that eighth note, it's everywhere, I think. I mean, I'm sure plenty of us will agree. But, for this film, Paul Greengrass was quite specific that that's actually what he wanted. It's a mixed blessing when you come onto something like that, because I was quite daunted by the prospect of getting on that film. I'd heard a lot of Paul Greengrass stories, I'm sure many of us have. He's a lovely guy, actually, in case he's watching. But, he's very specific with what he wants. He's very specific with his temp. And he called me up and he goes, "Look, Dave, this is basically getting the band back together. I know you weren't in the band the first time round, but you know what the chords are." I said, "Yeah, I do." And that's really, really what the job was. It was to give him what he would call a a sort of classic Bourne score. You know, obviously, you know, for my own personal pride, that I wanted to try and do certain things. And, you know, my first attempts when I was writing cues, I tried to take things, I actually went through every cue. I think John maybe even posted this on Facebook somewhere. I went through every cue from every film and did a harmonic distillation of what was going on. And it's nuts what John was doing in there. Really nuts what's going on under the surface. You know, and I try to extrapolate things from that, and I present them to Paul, and he goes, yeah, no, thanks. Listen to the temp. So, you know, there was a certain element of frustration that there were some handcuffs there. But then again, I have to say it was quite nice to legitimately be able to play in the Bourne playground and not feel like I was going to get sued. So, you know, it's a great experience. And, you know, and Paul really, you know, that's a real top-notch level of people I was working with. Paul Greengrass, Chris Rouse, the editor, and John Powell. In many ways, it doesn't get much better than that.
Oh, very cool. Now, Tina, you have certainly cut a very striking figure for yourself through social media, through your amazing work in Hans' show. And actually, I think you are the only cellist who has had an unlicensed action figure created from them. So.
I think Richard actually bought that.
They beat me to it. I mean, Tina, what's it like to really put, like, literally that kind of finger-bleeding passion into your work? Because, again, it's not often that, you know, the amazing players on sessions kind of rise to your level of notoriety, and especially kind of creating a signature sound for Wonder Woman.
I'm sorry, repeat that question? Multiple parts, okay.
Well, I mean, basically, again, you know, a lot of session players are fantastic, but they're kind of anonymous. You know, it's all about essentially the composer who's on that stage. But again, you know, you're a very memorable performer. You know, people really kind of know who you are. And again, I'm wondering what it takes to kind of rise to that level where people just like single you out as a player.
Okay, well, I think in life, you know, everybody has their own truth in what they enjoy doing. So I have a lot of friends who are session musicians who love playing in an orchestra, playing in chamber groups, playing in a group. I don't think there's any wrong or right. You know, everybody has to do what feels natural to them. For me, I've always just wanted to. I don't do very well when people tell me what to do. So I've always wanted to kind of explore and be able to explore as a person, you know, not just in music, but just in general in life, different things to experiment. Since we're here to talk about music, I guess experiment with different types of music, experiment with what I'm, I guess, doing with my own music. And the way that I got into kind of the scoring world was completely by accident. So I went to college, I went to USC for classical cello, because at that time I was still doing all classical music. And I remember doing some sessions for like $15 an hour or something with the student composers at the time, because I was super broke and just trying to do whatever I could to make money from music. And I think how did it start? So my goal at the time, I really love industrial metal. And so my life goal when I was like 18, 19, was like, I want to be like a metal cellist, you know, so I was really focused on that. And so I saved, at the time, it was about like a little over $5,000. It took me 5 years to save that, like after college. And then I spent it all on a music video. My first music video was called Queen Bee. I didn't know how I was going to pay for rent or for food, but I was like, all right, I have to do this video, because I would tell people, yeah, I play metal cello. Like, oh yeah, that's cute, that's nice, Tina. You know, and I feel like if you don't show people, you can't just talk. Everybody has ideas, everybody talks about what they're going to do, but if you don't do it, it doesn't mean anything. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to do this. So it took me 3 months of like production, because I was doing most of it myself because I couldn't afford to hire people. And we did the video, and after the video came out, actually John Debney called me first, and he saw the video and he said, hey, do you want to play on Iron Man, I think 2 it was? And I said, okay, sure. And then Hans saw the video, so that's how we actually first met. So he called me, and okay, he knows this. I actually didn't know who he was at the time. So I was more interested in Metallica and Rammstein. I was like, who? So his assistant, Andrew, called me on my phone. They got my phone number. I was visiting my mom. My parents live in San Diego, and we were at the mall because she wanted a new purse or something. So we're at the mall, and Andrew called me, and he said, oh, I'm calling from Hans Zimmer's office. I'm like, I don't know who that is. So I said, you know, I'm so sorry. I'm actually shopping right now with my mom. Can you just call me back tomorrow? And he was like, okay. And then they called me back the next day. And he said, can you just come into the studio? And I said, okay. So I really honestly did not know what I was getting myself into. So I arrived, and they said, Hans is eating lunch right now with Guy Ritchie, and because they were working on Sherlock Holmes. Again, I had no idea what was going on, so I just walked in. We ended up having lunch, and we were talking, and then that's how it started. And I started working with Hans, and this was maybe, Sherlock Holmes came out, I think, 8 years ago? 7, 8 years ago. And then after that, I was also working on other projects with like friends that I had met at USC who were in the film scoring program, like Austin Wintory. I think he's the first person I started working with. Yay, Austin. He's great. So that's kind of how I got into the scoring world. Again, so it was completely unintentional. I was really trying to do my own music, which I'm still trying to do at the same time. But it's been amazing to be able to collaborate with all kinds of musicians, with composers, and it's really amazing. You don't know what life can bring you. So hopefully I answered that question.
Very well, Tina.
Very roundabout. Okay.
But let's go to Wonder Woman. When you think of like an iconic superhero theme, it's like an orchestra. But literally, when you hear that cello, even in the trailer for Wonder Woman, it's Wonder Woman. And
Some
again,
people don't know it's a cello though. They think it's guitar. I'm like, no, it's not guitar. It's cello.
My mistake. But tell me a bit. Did you have any kind of conception about how popular that sound you were creating would become for identifying this character?
No, of course not. So I went in, and it's only a few notes, like the actual theme, da-da-da-da, like over and over again. And it took us 2 entire days. We were layering. It's really about I think 20 layers. It's really about the sound design. So we layered, I don't know, played just for hours and hours every day in Hans' studio. And he would stand in front of me and just like yell things, to try to inspire me, right? More aggressive. I'm like, oh my God, okay. So we did that for 2 days straight. And then I guess, the engineers went in and picked about 20 of the most aggressive takes, mushed it all together, and that's what happened.
That's an amazing sound. Now, Daniel, a ghost story is like another impressive score that you've done with director David Lowery after beautiful work on Ain't Them Body Saints and Pete's Dragon, which I didn't expect this beautiful James Horner-esque score for the film. But a ghost story returns you kind of back to your roots with David. What was it like creating a sound that was at once intimate but yet cosmic for this film? It's like literally unlike any other kind of ghost score I've ever heard before.
It's really daunting. I was terrified. I had no idea what to do when we started. It's probably the quietest film that I've ever worked on. And there's almost no dialogue in the film, so anytime I was working on music, it was right up front, which felt like extra pressure. But because I've been working with David for so long now, that took some of the edge off of it a bit. It was a very short process because I came into working on a ghost story straight from finishing up the Exorcist TV show, and I only had about a month or so to do it, so it was fairly accelerated, but once I got started, after I got over all of my fears about doing it in the first place, once I got started, it just went pretty effortlessly from start to finish. I would say this is the only film I've ever done where the 80 to 90% of the score in the film is the first draft of what I did. I turned it in. David really liked it. Maybe a couple of little tweaks, but otherwise it's basically just my ideas out there in front, and it's my favorite film that I've ever done. It's the film that I have thought about the most since I've finished working on it. I still think about it almost daily. So I don't know. I feel like I got really lucky to be able to do a film like that.
I mean, it's such a beautiful and touching film. And, I can't imagine it's harder to score a movie where the character literally says nothing.
Yeah.
And to kind of create that personality out of it. And the score is a lot of it is based upon this beautiful song that you wrote.
Yeah, thank you. That was the starting point, this song that I had already written before the film. That was the starting point for the score. And taking that song and taking it apart and running it through Paul's stretch to slow it way down, to make atmospheric soundscapes out of it, was the first thing that I did for the score. And it sort of just allowed me to feel like I could go anywhere or do anything. Because we made this film by ourselves and there were no outside producers. It was really just David and I. It was down to the two of us and what we wanted for the film. It's pretty rare that happens. So I felt like I could do whatever I wanted, which is thrilling and also scary at the same time.
Now, Alex, I think, you have to really kind of go back to the days of Star Trek and Lost in Space for just a better time to be watching genre television than we have right now. But I have to say, I think for me, of all the shows I love, like Westworld and Game of Thrones, there's really no more relevant or really scary show than Black Mirror, which I'm just a huge fan of. Can you tell me what it was like to enter that universe for the episode Shut Up and Dance?
Well, I think you want to leave it as soon as possible, to be honest. It's sort of uncomfortable. I think it's uncomfortable because it's, as you say, it's so relevant. The internet is part of our lives, isn't it? And it's, I think I love the internet, I love technology, and I think we've all walked into a relationship with the internet where we're so deeply involved and entrenched with it, we don't even know it. So when you watch something like Black Mirror, I tell you one thing that I now do after Black Mirror, I have one of these little things that covers up your eyesight camera on the Not that I'm doing anything nefarious, but I just thought, I'm sitting there in the studio all day. I don't know who's watching me, so I have one of these little. You can buy it for like $3. It's just a little slider that goes over the eyesight camera. I recommend it. So, just in case.
What was it like, just creating the score for? Because again, what's interesting about the episode is that you have no idea why this kid is going. It's like, okay, well, you did this. You just watched that stuff. What's so bad about it? And you have to kind of build to this revelation where it's like, oh, I get it. This is why he is not going right away to the police. Well, what was it like creating that kind of suspense?
Well, as I said, it's very uncomfortable, really. It's not really like music what I wrote. It's more like just some nasty sound in your head, I guess, which is fun to do sometimes. I think uncomfortableness is a big part of it, and I think it's a big part of Black Mirror. I actually haven't seen the other episodes. I must see them, but in a way I didn't. It's often the way, as composers, we sometimes we're just like in our own little space, and we don't get to see. Sometimes when I haven't done that many TV shows, I've done more movies, but to be honest, the ones I've done, quite often we end up doing them totally out of order. So you'll do like the middle episode first and the end episode in the middle, and so sometimes I don't even know what's going on in the story, to be quite frank. So just to put it into context, I came to Black Mirror just without any preconceptions of what it should be, and I'd worked with the director before, and we just watched it and did it as its own little story. But I think the motto is just beware. I think.
Now, Steve, what was it like for you you've been in every Transformers film from the beginning. What was it like for you to create that sound, where essentially you're creating like a kind of emotional flesh and blood characters out of these iconic characters that people are more familiar with from the cartoon shows in the 80s. And with The Last Night, again, it introduces this really fun Arthurian twist to this whole musical saga.
I'll tell you a quick story. It was exhausting, first of all. I aged 10 years every film. But John Powell once told me that he was teaching some students, I don't know where, but he said he was doing a class, and he said he used Transformers as an example. And John I've loved for years, I've learned a lot from him, and he was around when I was first starting, and he taught me a lot. He said he told the students, look at these, these fake computer-generated things, and watch this scene, and just think about, why do you care about these fake things that somebody just drew, and they're not real. He said, why do I feel emotion that this big thing is, computer-generated thing is dying? And he says, it's all because of the music. And he told me that story, and I was, brought a tear to my eye that John would say that, because it's sort of the biggest challenge in those films, as I'm sure everyone on this panel will attest to, when you have things that don't exist, and often you're scoring a picture where they literally don't exist. They're not there yet. And you just have, a little description of what's going on. Ultimately, you want the audience to connect emotionally with the film. That's, I think, a composer's goal, is to help that happen. Because if audience doesn't care about the characters, then why go? Why go to a film if you don't care what's happening? So that was always my goal, to create some sort of emotional connection between us and these fake, big, giant things. And that was the direction from Bay very early on, that they have to feel noble, they have to feel important and majestic, and especially in the first film, when we hadn't seen any of these things before. I don't think we'd seen CGI kind of like that at that point in time. So that was very inspiring to me. And he came in one day and he said, Stephen is going to listen to these themes next week, so they should be pretty good. And I knew I didn't ask which Stephen, I knew which Stephen. I said, okay. So, and I wasn't there when he heard them, but I got a report that Stephen felt that they were, he felt the themes, and he thought they were doing the job. So, and this was still relatively early in my career, and it was very, I think, Alex used the word terrifying. Daniel, sorry. It was terrifying, because the Transformers is something I had grown up with, and this was the first live-action, big cinematic presentation, and it was only my second film with Michael, and it was his big, he wasn't with Bruckheimer anymore. It was sort of, he's gone off on his own, and he took me with him, and I'm still not sure why, but he took me with him, and it was just a very daunting, terrifying challenge but I think as a composer, you have to let all that go and just sit there in your room, as you said, in your little cave, and work. And as long as you're kind of feeling it, you have to trust what's in here, because that's what you have. And that's what I did, and I just wrote theme after theme. I must have written 50 themes for that first movie, just because I didn't know what would stick. And so that from that film, that kind of became my process generally, is just to write themes and try to inspire myself, and then present them to the filmmakers. But does that sort of answer your question?
Did you present everything? Did you present everything?
That's a good question. I think, no, I'm sure some of it ended up in the trash can, but some stuff that you write, you'll work on, I'm sure you can all agree, you work on something, you go, oh my God, this is the greatest thing, and then you listen to it in the morning and go, this is the worst thing I've ever heard. Did I do this? I don't know how that happened. You just get so into it, and for some reason your brain thinks it's good, and it's just not good, so delete it and start over. But often it helps, divert you into the right direction. Oh, Jesus, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. I'll pay you for it.
That mic's a Decepticon.
I broke it.
But how did having the Arthurian legend in this movie kind of freshen things up for you?
That was, when Michael first told me that, I was so excited, because I'm like, what can I do? This is number 5. What am I supposed to do at this point? And he told me this whole King Arthur thing, and I thought, oh great, it's something different at least. And he showed me the first thing I saw was the opening. I don't know how many of you have seen it, but it's just this opening battle in the times of King Arthur and Merlin and dragons and all this cool stuff. And he showed me that. I thought, well, this is going to be great. A Michael Bay take on that sort of thing. We haven't seen that before. And I asked him, how much of that is in the movie? And he said, oh, that's it, really. Just at the opening. I'm like, oh, all right. I really was kind of like, oh, God. Okay, so it's that, and then that's all. But I thought he kind of cleverly wove it in throughout the story. And even though for me personally, as a Transformers fan, I don't really care that Mark Wahlberg is the last knight. Don't tell him I said that, but I wish it was more about the Transformers, since that's what the movie is called. But it did give me a chance. I did really enjoy writing. Like that was, I called in my friend Charlie, this amazing violinist, and just experimented with him. I thought kind of a solo Celtic vibe would be nice for that era, and that's something Michael Bay would never have approved previously. What is that? What is that horrible noise? He just wants big brass. But so I did this kind of intimate little violin theme, and he loved it. He called it the British theme. So we stuck the British theme everywhere, and but it was fun. It was really fun to. I focused on that because that was something different, and it was such a big part of the movie. Unfortunately, as I said, there's not a lot of Transformers stuff going on in Part 5, just how it worked out. But towards the end, they kind of come back, so I bring in some of the original themes. But yeah, it gave me a blank canvas, I suppose, to try something a little bit different, which is always nice when you're working on the 5th movie in a franchise. And a lot of fans often, I'll just say this quickly, a lot of fans have asked me, why didn't you reuse all of these themes that were in the first one more? Like they kind of come and go a little bit. And that's strictly because Michael didn't want me to. And to him, it was very important that each movie felt like a new one. And I don't know if that was him just being self-conscious. He wanted to, everything to be brand new and shiny. But I grew to enjoy that direction. Just because every movie, we could have easily scored all 5 with what we'd written for the first one, but that would have been boring. So every movie I started with a blank slate and just wrote a bunch of themes. And towards like 2/3 into the process, we go, okay, where can we put the old themes? And that's how we would just, that's a good spot. We'll put it there and put it there and put it there. But for the most part, it's always new. It was always new stuff, which kept it interesting for me.
Very cool. Now, Lolita, we can literally say that you have like a composing Justice League with Christopher Carter and Michael McQuiston, who are with you in Dynamic Music Partners. And, listening to all the amazing music that you've done for innumerable superhero animation shows, it's all very cohesive. How does Dynamic Music Partners work, but yet also give you your own moments to shine?
Well, we decided a long time ago that it would be wise for us to join forces rather than compete with one another, because we were literally each of us getting the same call to submit for such and such show. And we are really strong believers in treating every episode, every scene as its own unique, wonderful moment. Every episode is scored. It's not, we don't really do tracking. I know that that's a luxury in this day. And I have the utmost respect for Michael and Christopher. So we basically, when there's a new show, of course we meet with whoever is the showrunner, whether it's producer Bruce Timm or Eric Radomski, whoever's in charge of who's going to give the final say, and we of course work on what the new style is going to be, and it's always something like, we want something like we've never ever heard before, which eventually kind of goes back to, we want something like we've heard before, but maybe just but it's really quite wonderful, and I think it's wonderful for the producer or director who we meet with, because we're watching the first baby by ourselves. They have an audience of 3, and there's 3 times as much laughter, 3 times as much, oh, I can't believe that he did that. And so it's really quite a wonderful experience. And whereas a lot of my colleagues around town, it's just because of the schedule, there's huge teams writing in the back rooms using the themes of the main composer. In our situation, it's pretty much who you meet is who you get, and we are very, as far as our business model, we're very, very equal in what we do. And that's our work as a team has been 95% on animation, and then as individuals we branch out and do our own thing. I mean, I just recently completed a feature documentary about African wildlife poaching, a very powerful film. I have a piece premiering at Carnegie Hall in October. Michael did a big planetarium show. Christopher does a lot of horror films. So we each can go off and do our own thing, but know that when we come back, there's this, just to cover the sheer volume of work. And of course, we all owe our start to Shirley Walker, who's gone way too soon, and whose impact on this industry and on so many composers, I think here and also just in the world, is just profound. And her mentorship and the way she taught me to think about certain scenes and how to take a meeting and how to present myself, and I mean everything she's still sitting on my shoulder. And I remember once I was at a spotting session, and she asked me afterwards to talk to her about the backstory of a certain character, and this is early, like this is like 25 years ago, and I was like, I don't know the backstory. Boy, did she lay into me. So you have to know everything about the characters. Even though if you weren't raised as a comic book geek, you need to know everything about everyone, and why this and why that. So then it's like, okay, did I really think I was going to be a comic, superhero? And I thought I was going to be the next, John Barry scoring out of Africa. I mean, that's kind of my dream gig, But I'm so grateful for the work I've done, and it's just, it's really an honor to be able to sustain a living and have people like what I do. I mean, I'm very humbled by being here and seeing so many wonderful people here.
Yeah, and on that note, actually, I want to note the sad passing of Daniel Licht, the composer of Dexter, who was actually one of our very first guests at the first Fans of Film Music that we did. So now I want to turn it over to you guys. We're recording this, so basically I'm going to repeat your question, just in terms of how we're recording this. So before you might answer, I'll repeat the audience question back to you. And also for time's sake, let's make this for individual composers as opposed to like a group question. It just gets more questions in there. So let's start. Who's got a question? No. Okay, someone's got to go first. Okay.
They've got nothing left.
You got nothing. Okay.
Oh, Peter, that's...
Anyone? Okay, Peter, I'm sorry.
We talked briefly in there.
Michael, did you have any idea that Get Out was going to become the phenomenon with both critics and at the box office that it did?
I had no idea. No idea. I mean, whenever you finish a project, you want to do your best work. So when you're done, you think, we did well. And we, at the end of the mix, everybody said, patted ourselves on the back. Good job. But I had no idea, and the ride of seeing that happen culturally was just amazing. I was just happy that the film opened with my name in it. Honestly, like that's the goal. I thought, look, I didn't get fired, and the film opened. That was really just my goal, and anything after that would have been gravy. And look at what has happened. But frankly, I thought, we live in a very polarized time. Do I need to remind you? So I really thought that there were some people who'd really get the film, but then I thought there would be people who would just be up in arms against it. And it doesn't seem like there's been much of that. And I don't know if that's because the people who might object to it never saw it. Maybe it's that simple. But I did expect a lot more backlash from it. Than there's really been almost zero, at least by the time it gets filtered up to me. So.
I think when you see a viral video sensation of doing the grandfather run, you got to hit.
Steph Curry did the run.
Wow.
Another question from someone? You, sir. Let's make that question for David. You obviously got your start as an assistant for, I think, Harry first. How did you land that position, and what's your advice for someone who wants to land that kind of position with a major composer?
Well, Steve should chip in as well, because he got there before
Yeah.
I did. But
Yeah.
I've actually known Harry since I was, I think I was 9 years old, and we both actually go back to a completely different universe of cathedral music in England. And at the time, neither of us had any idea that we'd be in LA. So, he's like, 10, 12, 13 years older than me. So I was a kid in the choir and he was an adult in the choir. Very briefly, he'd been in Egypt, he was teaching, and then eventually he found his way into Hans's camp. So he took off here many years before I did. And I was introduced to him by a mutual friend. I came over here. It was during the time of the Da Vinci Code. And I was sort of reintroduced to Harry and... I guess I did come over here hoping something would come from it, and actually I went back to England very depressed because nothing came from it at all. Apart from the fact that I think I'd surreptitiously left a CD of my music on Harry's desk, just didn't say anything. Although I say surreptitiously, I can also remember the hideously gaudy cover that the CD had, so it wasn't that surreptitious because it was definitely saying, listen to me. And then, lo and behold, a few weeks later, he said, I've got this sort of potential car crash of 3 films happening. Why don't you come over for 3 months and see if this is something you really want to do? And it's now been 11 years. I've almost unpacked my suitcase. And it's one nice thing, having worked under Harry for not that long actually, only about 18 months, and then he sort of helped me he pushed a few directors in my direction and sort of was almost a broker because I was new and hadn't done this before. He sort of gave them a guarantee that I wouldn't screw it up. I don't know, I probably owe him some money for that. But and it was also nice to score a movie with him sort of on, as an equal, having sort of worked under him. It just was a different dynamic. But I mean, Steve, you should probably just chip in a little bit because you were the proto assistant for Hart. You're trying to forget it.
No. It's all a blur. Let's see, where do I start? Well, everyone okay?
When you speak, there's catastrophe.
Yeah, it was 1996, and briefly, I like most film composers, I went to college initially to study computer engineering, and got really bored of it after a year and switched to music and didn't really know what I was going to do with myself. Thought maybe I'd be a recording engineer. I had a little setup at home. So I did some little jobs at studios around LA. Was a big Hans Zimmer fan at the time and looked in the big book of studios and found Hans Zimmer Remote Control, Media Ventures at the time, and called it up and said, do you need any help? And the guy on the phone said, yeah, come on down. And it was back at this, now currently Hans owns, I think, 20% of Santa Monica. But back then he had 2 small buildings, and so I went, and Harry had just come over to help Hans on The Fan. I think it was a Tony Scott film. And I did interning for a few months, but I never left because I really enjoyed it. I wasn't thinking, oh, I'm going to be a famous film composer. I just loved the place and loved what they were doing, and they were all so nice, and that I never left. I think I was probably annoying a lot of the people there, but Harry was very gracious, and I remember one night he would work overnight in Hans's room on The Fan while Hans went to sleep, and he said, if you want to hang out in the back of the room, you can, and just don't make noise. So I would sit in there and watch him work on The Fan, and that sort of developed into him asking me to work for him, which was great. I didn't know that was going to happen. I heard later that Jeff Zinelli, another well-known composer, was at Berkeley at the time, finishing up his semester of school studying film music, and had been told that when he gets back to LA, he would have a job as Harry Gregson Williams' assistant. And unbeknownst to the studio people who told Jeff that, Harry asked me to be his assistant. So I think there was some animosity there but we became good friends. We're good friends now. I learned that later. I thought that was funny. But yeah, it was just Harry was just a good guy, and he needed some help. And at first it was technical help, and then at night when he left, I would mess around in the studio because it was way better than mine. And he kind of got wind of it and asked me to do a little cue here and there, and that just snowballed into whatever this is today. But yeah, so I think that story is probably pretty common. You know, just reach out to people that you admire their work and that you're interested in possibly working with, and maybe things will happen.
Yeah, thank you. Another question? Miss, I'm sorry. So Tina, let's make this for you. Where do you see female composers in 5 years?
Well, I can't claim to be psychic. However, I think it would be amazing if, obviously, we were a little bit more common in general in film music. And I think there's a lot, I know a lot of young female aspiring composers and working composers. I myself would not call myself a composer quite yet because I've been focusing on performing, but I would eventually like to move into that direction because, as I was telling Lolita earlier, I don't think I want to prance around on stage for the rest of my life because it might get slightly inappropriate at a more mature age, and I want to be able to have children, make babies, live in LA. So, I mean, that's not the only reason. I love to compose music as well. It's just it's difficult to balance when you try to do too much, So personally, yes, that is my long-term goal, and I think there's a lot of young talent that happen to be, female, that are working on it. So hopefully it'll happen.
Lolita, what do you think?
Well, it's not going to take 5 years. It's happening right now very rapidly. Basically, there are many female composers out there. I think the biggest deficit is in the top tier, the tentpole features. That it seems like there's an obstacle to that, but there's a lot of positive motion happening from the studios to at least want to open the door for the submission process for the top films. I mean, usually the director already knows who they want to work with, even if it's this, we're listening to demos. It's usually ends up being that they get who they originally wanted. But I'm the current president of the Alliance for Women Film Composers, and if you go to our website, we have over 200 women composers in our directory, and I just say spend a few hours perusing the directory and look at some of the credits that are already there. So it's through amplification, it's through events like this, it's also through showing the younger generation of women composers that there are strong women that are actually working. I have nothing to apologize for. I live in a beautiful home. I have a lovely family. I have a successful career. I have an Emmy Award. And I just have to feel confident and show people that it's all right to sing my praises and have other people sing my praises. So we're out here, and please look us up online, and you can also become a supporting member. And it's definitely, I have no interest in having some sort of a tokenism approach to this. It's really about, listen to this music. Some of it is absolutely amazing. Not all of it. Some of it's not amazing. And some of the guys' music isn't amazing. Some of the stuff that's in the top movies isn't amazing, but somebody knew somebody who knew somebody. So, look for the really great music and help amplify that. Help amplify, be it male, female, people of color. Help amplify those composers who you believe should deserve to be up at the top tier. Because your voices as fans are actually really, really powerful. You can actually write to the studios and say, gosh, I just love that score. Oh my gosh, Steve's score for that was just amazing. Write to the music people. I don't know how often they get letters from fans, but give it a try. And of course, if you like my music, write to them about my music.
You, sir? Steve, what do you think about the apprenticeship model of scoring or working under a composer?
Right. That's a good question. I know exactly what you're talking about. And I think the 8 shows thing, I think that happens more in TV, obviously. But for me personally, my previous assistant was a composer named Nathan Whitehead, who I think fell more in the model of the apprenticeship, because now I've like The Purge, that horror film, they approached me to do it, and I said, I can't, I don't have time, but I know somebody who does have time, and he's really good, and I'll produce if you want me to, I'll listen to it, but it's going to be composed by him. And I think that's the way it should work, in my opinion. I do personally know people who have 8 TV shows, and it makes me, I don't know how they do it. I mean, I guess they just have a lot of people around them to, but my friend Blake Neely, who's a great composer, and I think he actually goes out of his way to say, it's me and this person on The Flash or something, and me and this person. I don't think he hides that. I'm not totally sure because I don't watch those shows, but so I think in that regard, he's getting their names out there, and the producers, perhaps next show, they'll just say, Blake, maybe we'll work with this person. I'm not sure if that's how Blake operates, but that's how I like to operate, because it was done for me. Harry and Hans, I wouldn't have met Michael Bay had it not been for, I can name 10 people who all said, yeah, Michael, you should give Steve a listen, and that goes for a lot of different directors I worked with.
Yeah.
So I try to do that. I think that's the way it should work.
Yeah, it's great to give credit where it's due.
Yeah.
Let's get another question. You, sir?
I have a question for Daniel.
Daniel, what inspired you to take the rural approach to Pete's Dragon?
This is another film that I've done with the director, David Lowery, and it was the 3rd or 4th film that we did together. And although this is a Disney film, and the other films that we'd done together are small budget independent films, it still very, very much felt like his world that he always creates, which has a very grounded, down-home kind of feel to it, for my take anyway. And so I went into the process of working on this big Disney film, having never done a big film before, thinking that it would need to all be orchestral. But as soon as I saw the footage from the film, it was clear that this was not going to be, it wasn't going to work that way if we wanted to be true to the storytelling in the film. So I went back to some of the instrumentation and some of the arrangements and ideas that I'd used on previous films of his that had a similar aesthetic. And I tried those things. And I was lucky that not only did David feel like it worked for the film, but also the folks at Disney also felt they were open to the idea of having some more intimate music in a big film. So I wrote what felt right for what I was seeing on screen, which felt very down to earth. And luckily it worked. Everybody liked it.
It's very cool. You, sir?
I have a question for Alex.
Alex, do you ever get tired of Africa, like hearing that Toto song?
Africa's a very big place, Well, no, I never went looking to write music with an African basis. It's it just seems to have happened fairly consistently, but it's, I think Africa is a big place, and it's really, it's a continent. There's so many different countries, and there's so much different music in Africa, so there's always something different to look for. And when we were doing Mandela, that's obviously South Africa, and I went to South Africa and recorded stuff there. And when we did Roots last year or year before, that was West Africa, and we recorded some stuff in West Africa. So, it's good to actually try and just break it down, not just as a place, but it's lots of different countries. But my wife always jokes that people probably think I'm from Africa because I've done all these movies. But I'm really not. It's just as you can see, I'm a white sort of Jewish guy from North London, actually. But I actually, when I look back on it, one of the very first things I did after I was a student, I went out and I bought Cubase version 1, which was very exciting in 1992 or whatever it was, and I set up my computer, and looking back on it, the first thing I did was I actually sampled a piece of African music and chopped it up and started doing stuff with it, and I don't know why, but I've always just loved, I've always loved music from that continent. But I've been very lucky to do lots of things. I've done action movies. I did Escape Plan with Schwarzenegger and Stallone. And I've done Idris Elba movies, and I've done comedies. And so I've been very lucky in a way. And being pigeonholed for one thing isn't a bad thing, but also being a real generalist, because I have done lots of those different things can be really tricky as well as a composer, because sometimes people don't quite know where to put you. If you've got lots of different things going on, it can be hard. It can be a hard sell for your agent. It's like at least your agent can say he's the Africa guy. It's great, But if you say, but also he's done dramas and he's done sort of comedies and he's done this and that. So being known for one thing is probably a good thing. But I'm lucky to have done all of those different things as well.
Next question. Gene? Let's ask Lolita, how do you market yourself for a specific project you might really want?
I used to think it was a really big mystery of how people get jobs. Well, it helps to have a publicist. It helps to have a good manager or agent, just to have access to that material. But more than anything, it helps to keep in touch with everybody that's worked on previous projects of yours. So I have a database where I put in everybody. I mean, I put the cameraman in. If there are projects in common that we've worked on, I stay up late at night looking at Facebook. It's like, oh gosh, so-and-so started reading scripts about this. Okay, I need to touch base with that person. Because it's really about personal contacts. And I don't know, I'm not in that position where it's like, oh, I'd really like to do that film and Thomas Newman is up for it and I think I'm going to try to get that. I mean, it's kind of I would love that and let's hope that happens someday. But it's kind of being realistic and seeing who do I know that is working on something that I'm interested in doing, and not always necessarily reaching out to those people to ask for stuff. Reaching out to the people just to say, hey, let's have lunch and let's hang out, and don't ask anything. Just let them talk, and eventually at some point they'll remember that. Oh yeah, I'm going to call her up. So. That's just my feeling. Like the marketing thing is more about, the actual physicality of the marketing, publicist, manager, these things, this guy, So it's, word of mouth and trying to present yourself in a good light as much as possible. So.
Kaya, question?
Question for Daniel.
So the question is, going from Ain't Them Body Saints to Pete's Dragon, how difficult was it for you to get Disney to consider you as opposed to going with like a named composer?
It was very difficult. I had to convince them over and over again that I was capable of doing the job. And were it not for the director, David, going to bat for me like I couldn't imagine anybody doing time and time again, I wouldn't have had the job. But he wanted me to do the film from the beginning. I submitted music to Disney along those lines, writing for a couple of the scenes in the film back in 2014. They took a listen to it. They said no. They hired Howard Shore, and he worked on it for about 4 or 5 months. He wrote some music for it. They weren't crazy about it. He wasn't, didn't have the time to make the kinds of revisions that they were asking for, and then they got to a place where they were really happy with the film overall, but not at the place they wanted to be at with the music. And so once again, David came back to them and said, I really think you should give Daniel a chance. And he called me, after that conversation with Disney, he called me and said, how soon can you get to LA? And I was there 2 days, I was here 2 days later, because I was living in Texas at the time. And then I went through a 3-week trial process where I wrote music for specific scenes in the film. At the time in 2014 when I was writing, there was just pre-visualizations available. They hadn't shot anything. But at this point, the film was almost entirely edited. So I was writing for fully formed scenes. And I wrote for about 3 weeks. I wrote for these 4 scenes that the Disney folks thought would show them whether or not I was capable of doing the film. And I think going back to this question that you asked me earlier, I think it was really not so much that in the end I was able to show them I was capable of writing big music for a big film. It was more that I was willing to write intimate music where maybe it was less expected, and they took a shine to that, maybe partly because they don't get it very often with their films. But at the end of those 3 weeks, they liked the music that I had written, and I got the job. Did I answer your question?
Great job, you did. Well,
It was really difficult to get the job. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. Didn't have much time to do it because I came in at the very end of the process. But I'm incredibly proud of what we did, and I felt like for the most part, the musical ideas that I had, that David was excited about, made it into the film. They were there, they were represented on the screen. The Disney folks ended up, in the end, being incredibly supportive and sort of encouraging me to do the music that I thought was right for the film.
Well, we're almost getting to the signing part of this, so I'm going to actually wrap it up with my question for each of you. We're obviously now in Emmy season where there's a lot of, kind of self-celebration, and it always tends to essentially be industry people celebrating industry people, but, with the gathering here of, people who buy your music just because they like it, what's it like for each of you to have fans, to have, just people who just love your music and buy it? Michael, what do you think?
Really gratifying, very unexpected, and I don't think I need to add more to that. I obviously I've always listened to film music and appreciated what it's done, but I always felt like that was kind of a private love affair I had with the music, and that there was nobody else who. And I'd be careful not to bore my friends with the details about it. Y'all, right? You can't bore your friends about can't geek out when they're not ready to hear it. But to hear that, right? So to be able to have to note there are other people who feel that way when they hear film music and feel like they have their own little love affair with what is going on with the music. That's really great. So thank you.
I actually, when I was asked to do this, I said I'm not aware that I have any fans. So I've already signed 2 CDs today, so I feel it feels very good. But it is nice, and I know there's some things I've worked on where I have to say I'm not particularly proud of particularly probably the film in the first instance I didn't particularly like, and musically I felt sort of hampered, and I could only go so far. And not necessarily where I wanted to go, but there are certain things, especially a show where the Good Fight or The Good Wife was previously where I've been allowed to do something that I really wanted to do without any kind of handcuffs at all. And it's funny, I remember I changed style in The Good Wife in season 5, and the minute I changed style, I started to get emails from people saying, "God, we really loved this. This is really great." Previous 4 seasons, not a word at all. So it is, when it does connect. But also, I have to say, I don't think there's anything wrong. It's funny, Alex, you were talking about your score to Black Mirror, where you said it was kind of noise, and you do get hired to do jobs where you do need to it's about holding space and tension, and that isn't necessarily going to thrill everyone, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. There's an art in doing that as well, which shouldn't be dismissed or overlooked. Having said which, if you write a good tune and it brings joy to people, and someone sends you an email or asks you to sign a CD, that's great as well.
Of course, I think it feels amazing when you get positive feedback about anything that you're doing. For me personally, because I guess I am more of a performer, I guess if nobody listened to my music or watched my videos or came to shows, then there would be nobody to share the music with. And yeah, I do believe that even if nobody liked what I was doing, I would still make music because I love to do it. It's part of my expression as a person. It's just what I do. But I think I'd be lying if I said that it wasn't really, I don't know if it's gratifying, but it just, you can give yourself a tiny pat on the back and be like, okay, you're not completely crazy. You're not the only one. Because if everybody absolutely just hated everything you were doing, you might need to reconsider possibly what you're doing. So yeah, I'm very, I feel like, again, music without people listening to it, and it is a shared experience. I think it's important sorry, not to go off on a tangent, but there's two different things. So one is just making art or making music just for the sake of it because you're expressing yourself. And then there's also turning that into a viable business, into a viable source of income and living. And if for some reason what you're doing is not connecting with anybody, then, you might want to think, you can still do what you love to do that nobody seems to understand. That's great. But also to find a way where you can connect to people because it's a language. And if you're the only one speaking it, you're going to be alone, right? So yeah, I'm very grateful. Thank you.
I'm about to go out on tour with my band, and it's been a while since I've done that because I've been kind of busy with film stuff, and I'm really looking forward to going back on tour because that's where I started. That's what I did for a long time, just playing in bands and touring around, and it's been less of that the last few years. And the reason that I am excited about that is because of that connection with an audience that is immediate and it's there, and there's something about it in the room where you're connecting with people through music solely, and music being this intangible thing, it kind of boggles my mind that that's something that people can sort of grasp onto together and share. And to translate that to film music, it's not something that I quite understand, but as soon as Lolita said Shirley Walker's name, this piece of music from Batman the Animated Series came into my head and just started playing right there. And when we were in the booth before we came out here, somebody in another conversation that I wasn't even a part of said Jerry Goldsmith, and automatically this music from Total Recall showed up in my head. So there's something, for me, I am also a fan of film music, and there's something about it that just, I don't know, it's like little light bulbs or excitement happening whenever I think about music. For anybody to feel that way about music that I have written for films, it just, thank you.
Yeah, I always feel like being a composer is one of the most selfish things you can probably do. So I feel like I just sit in a room all day writing music to make myself happy. And just, well, it's sort of true in a way, but to echo what Tina just said, if you find that what makes you happy somehow speaks to someone else sometimes, that's just a wonderful thing, and it's probably a happy accident, so that's a wonderful thing. I actually don't do Facebook. I was just saying to David, so I've never entered the world of social media. I do have a website, and people contact me through that a lot, which is I just always find it amazing that people have actually heard what I've done. It happened first on one of the first ones was a very small film a long time ago called Dear Frankie, which was a very small family film I did for the Weinstein Company. It was actually when it was Miramax, and I started getting the odd email, then 1, and then 2, and then 5, and 10, and it just somehow it really connected with people, and then people would say, "Oh, I want to use this music for my wedding," or "I've just had a child and we had it at the birth," or "We had it at the conception," or I don't know. I started getting all sorts of crazy emails. Actually, some of them were so touching. Some of them were really, really moving. I thought it would I would put them together and make a little book out of them, because it's an amazing thing when it's partly the film, not all about the music. When the film is really great and it speaks to people on a certain level, and the music does as well, they speak greater than the sum of their parts, if you see what I mean. So it's a happy accident that I can sit all day and do something that makes me so happy, and somehow it maybe speaks to other people as well. What can I say? It's a joy.
I find it personally very inspiring and gratifying, and as Alex said, we sit alone a lot, and trying to come up with ideas. And as my career progressed or whatever, and I was doing more and more movies, I would start getting more feedback from fans and more letters and things online about the tracks they liked, or I've gotten so many letters about my grandmother passed away, and I listened to this theme and it helped me inspire me, or as simple as so I have a math test, and your whatever track from Transformers 3 really inspired me. And I think film score is kind of the only place young people are hearing orchestral music, most young people anyway. And so I think about that always when I'm writing, that this is my audience, you know, and I use that as inspiration, and yeah, it's very, you know, getting emotional here. I've gotten so many really nice, and I've met some of the fans at events like this. I'm trying to go to more of these. I haven't done that many, but you know, people come up to me and tell me these stories, and it makes me want to keep doing what I do and just be better next time, and hopefully reach more people. And so, thank you, everyone, for your support.
Yeah, well, I'm always incredibly humbled. It's hard to talk about that kind of a thing, just because it seems like, wow, you actually listen to my music? That's amazing. When I was at one of the Comic-Cons, this young couple came up to me afterwards, and they were like super goth, super, super, super skinny. Like, I don't know how you can get that skinny. They were just shaking. We just wanted to shake your hand because we got married to your music. And I said, oh, what piece? It's the cue at the end of Starcrossed where Hawkgirl flies away. And they had ripped this off the TV and played it with all the dialogue. And I'm thinking, this is crazy. So, you know, my hair stands up on my arms because I know how I feel when I mean, and I will never reach this level, but when I listened to The Mission, and I actually was in the same room with Morricone, I'm gonna cry. I just felt like I was in the presence of some sort of God, because that music just literally changed my life. And so just the idea that anyone is even remotely interested in what I do, I just say thank you. I'm very humbled.
Well, I want to give a big hand to all our great composers for joining. Michael Abels, David Buckley, Tina Guo, Daniel Hart, Alex Heffes, Steve Jablonsky, and Lolita Ritmanis. Oh, there it is. I see it.